What if I told you that what you are seeing right now is not random? That the confusion, the chaos, the silence, the warnings you keep ignoring are not separate events, but connected signs pointing to something final? Because in Islam, there comes a moment when warnings stop feeling like warnings and start feeling like reality closing in. A moment where delay is no longer safe, where ignorance is no longer an excuse, and where every heart is quietly being asked one question: are you still going to wait, or are you finally going to wake up? Because once this stage begins, it doesn't repeat and it doesn't pause, it only moves forward, and most people never realize what it was until it's already too late. 1. The world was never permanent. Most people don't truly reject the idea that life is temporary. They just live as if it isn't. There's a strange contradiction in human behavior. We all know, somewhere deep down, that nothing here lasts forever. Every story ends. Every building decays. Every name is eventually forgotten. Yet, despite this certainty, we structure our entire existence as if permanence belongs to us. We chase things with a kind of urgency that only makes sense if we believe we will live here forever. We build plans that assume unlimited time. We delay repentance, delay change, delay reflection, as if life has given us a written guarantee. But Islam removes that illusion completely. This world is not described as a home. It is described as a passage, a crossing point, a test, something you go through, not something you settle in. And the most dangerous part of this illusion is not that it exists, it is that it feels real while you are inside it. The comfort of routine, the noise of daily life, the repetition of goals and distractions, all work together to create a false sense of stability. You wake up, you work, you eat, you sleep, and the cycle makes you forget that every single day is actually moving you closer to departure, not arrival. If you look closely, nothing here stays in its original form. Your childhood turns into memory. Your strength turns into fatigue. Your relationships shift, fade, or transform. Even your own thoughts are not constant. Everything is in motion. Everything is slipping forward. And yet the mind still tries to hold on to the idea of permanence. Islam interrupts that illusion with a simple but unsettling truth. You are not here to stay. You are here to be tested, and everything you are given is temporary by design, not by accident. This is why attachment becomes dangerous when it blinds you. It is not that wealth, status, or success are forbidden in themselves, but when they become your sense of permanence, they begin to distort your perception of reality. You start believing that what is meant to be used has become something to own forever. And that belief slowly disconnects you from the awareness of where you are actually headed. Because the truth is, no one experiences the end of this world while expecting it. Every person who has ever lived believed, in some quiet way, that there was still more time, more conversations to be had, more chances to fix things, more opportunities to return. But the moment of departure does not ask for readiness. It only arrives. And this is why the reminder of impermanence is not meant to create fear alone. It is meant to correct perspective. When you understand that nothing here is permanent, you stop overvaluing what cannot last, and you start recognizing what actually matters beyond it. Because once the illusion of permanence breaks, life stops being just a sequence of days and starts becoming a preparation for something far more real than anything you can hold on to here. 2. Every sign was already sent. One of the most unsettling truths in Islam is that nothing about the reality of the end times is hidden. The signs were never meant to be secret. They were always made clear, not to confuse people, but to wake them. Yet what makes this lesson powerful and painful is not the absence of signs, but the presence of them everywhere, and the tendency of human beings to normalize what should have shocked them. In Islamic teaching, the signs of the final phase of this world are not described as isolated events. They are described as patterns, gradual shifts, changes in behavior, morality, belief, and perception, that slowly reshape how humanity understands truth itself. And the danger of gradual change is that it never feels like change while it is happening. People rarely wake up one day and realize the world has transformed. Instead, they adjust slowly. What once felt wrong becomes normal. What once felt unthinkable becomes acceptable. What once felt alarming becomes just another part of daily life. And in that slow adjustment, awareness fades without resistance. Islamic warnings about the end times were never meant to be read as distant prophecy alone. They were meant to function as mirrors. When you hear them, you are not just learning about future events, you are being asked to measure your present against them. But here is where the real test begins. Recognition does not automatically lead to response. Many people recognize signs intellectually, but disconnect them emotionally from their own life. They say, yes, these things are happening, but continue living as if awareness itself is enough, as if understanding replaces accountability. Yet in Islam, awareness without action is not completion, it is responsibility. The signs are not sent to entertain the mind. They are sent to awaken the heart. And a heart that remains unmoved after recognition is not lacking information, it is losing sensitivity. There is also a deeper layer to this truth. Signs are not only external events happening in the world. Some of the most important signs are internal, the way a person reacts to truth, the way the heart responds to reminders, the ease or discomfort felt when the name of Allah is mentioned, the distance or closeness a person feels toward prayer, repentance and reflection. These inner states are also part of the signs being sent, because Islam does not separate the condition of the world from the condition of the heart. They move together. One reflects the other. So when people ask why everything feels different today, why clarity feels harder, why truth feels heavier, why distraction feels stronger, it is not only about the world changing around them, it is also about something shifting within them. And the most critical realization is this: if signs are everywhere, then ignorance is no longer the problem. The problem becomes interpretation. What will you do with what you already see? Because in Islam, the warning is not incomplete. It is already delivered. The message is already reaching the heart. The evidence is already present in life itself. And at that point, the real question is no longer whether the signs have appeared. The question becomes whether the heart is still capable of responding to them. 3. Delay is not denial. One of the most misunderstood aspects of divine reality is the way time is given to human beings. People often mistake delay for forgiveness in the absolute sense, or worse, they confuse delay with absence of consequence. In Islam, however, the delay of punishment or consequence is not a sign that nothing is happening. It is a sign that something is being allowed to continue under patience and mercy. This is where many people become spiritually misled without even realizing it. When life continues smoothly after mistakes, when consequences do not appear immediately, when actions do not seem to produce instant outcomes, the human mind begins to assume that it is safe, that it is unaffected, that it is somehow beyond consequence. But Islam removes that assumption completely. Nothing is ever ignored. Nothing is ever forgotten. However, not everything is responded to immediately, and that gap between action and consequence is where most people lose awareness. Because when there is no immediate outcome, the mind naturally lowers its sense of urgency. A person sins and nothing happens. A person delays prayer and life continues normally. A person ignores reminders and still experiences comfort. Over time, this creates a dangerous psychological illusion, the belief that silence means approval. But silence in divine terms is not approval. It is time. And time is one of the most powerful tests given to human beings. The real danger is not that people commit mistakes. The deeper danger is that they become comfortable within them because consequences feel absent. That comfort slowly hardens the heart, not because punishment has not come, but because awareness of accountability has weakened. In Islamic understanding, this period of delay is not meaningless. It is an opportunity. a space given so that reflection can happen before return becomes impossible. It is a window, not a dismissal, but a window only has meaning if it is used. Many people assume that as long as life continues normally, they are safe. But continuity of life is not a guarantee of spiritual safety. It is simply continuation of opportunity. Every passing day is not proof that everything is fine. It is proof that you are still being given time to respond. And this is where the test becomes subtle, because nothing externally forces awareness. There is no visible interruption that demands change. Life continues its rhythm, and within that rhythm, a person must choose whether to wake up internally or remain unchanged externally. Islam does not deny mercy in delay. In fact, it emphasizes it, because if consequences were immediate, there would be no space for repentance, no room for return, no chance for transformation. But mercy without response becomes wasted opportunity, and that is the real warning hidden inside delay. Not that punishment is immediate, but that delay is temporary, and no one is told how long their delay will last. Which means every moment of ease is not confirmation of safety. It is an invitation to change before certainty replaces possibility. Now 4. Show more, show less. Lesson 4. The heart is the real battlefield. When people think about struggle, they usually imagine external conflict, problems in life, difficulties in society, challenges in the world around them. But Islam shifts that entire perspective and places the center of struggle somewhere no one else can fully see, the human heart. Because in Islamic understanding, the most decisive battles are not fought with the body. They are fought with awareness, intention, and inner direction. A person may appear stable on the outside while being completely unsettled within, and another may appear ordinary while carrying deep clarity inside. The difference between the two is not circumstance, it is the state of the heart. The heart is not just an emotional center. It is the place where choices are formed before they become actions. Every decision you make begins as a subtle movement inside you. A thought is accepted or rejected. A desire is strengthened or weakened. A reminder is absorbed or ignored. And slowly, over time, these internal responses shape the entire direction of a person's life. This is why Islam places so much emphasis on the condition of the heart. Because if the heart is aligned, actions naturally follow. But if the heart is distracted, even correct actions can lose their meaning. One of the most dangerous conditions is not open rejection of truth, but gradual distance from it. It rarely happens suddenly, it happens through repetition. A person hears reminders but does not reflect. They know what is right but postpone response. They feel moments of clarity but return to distraction. And with each cycle, sensitivity reduces slightly. Not because the truth has changed, but because the heart has adjusted to ignoring it. And this is where the real struggle begins. Not in choosing between obvious right and wrong, but in resisting the slow erosion of awareness. Because the heart does not lose direction in one moment. It loses direction through many small moments that feel insignificant at the time. Islam describes guidance as something that requires protection, not because it disappears easily, but because it can become buried under neglect. The heart must be actively maintained, not just once, but continuously, and what competes for the heart is not always evil in an obvious form. Often it is distraction, noise, constant engagement, endless occupation with things that do not allow space for reflection. When attention is always filled, there is no room left for awareness. And without awareness, the heart begins to operate on autopilot. At that point, a person can still be active in life, still productive, still engaged with the world, but internally disconnected from purpose. This is why Islam calls attention back inward repeatedly, because the real danger is not that a person stops believing. The deeper danger is that belief becomes passive, present in name, but absent in influence. And when the heart is no longer guiding behavior, everything else begins to take its place. Habits, environment, impulse, and routine. So the true question is not only what you do outwardly, but what your heart is becoming while you do it. Because every moment of neglect is not just a missed action, it is a shift in direction that may not be noticed until much later. And by the time it is noticed, the distance may already feel large. 5. Repentance has an expiry point. There is a truth in Islam that most people intellectually know, but very few truly live their life around. It is the reality that repentance is always open, but not indefinitely. And the danger is not in misunderstanding that mercy exists. The danger is in assuming that mercy cannot reach its limit for the individual. Because for many people, repentance becomes something they believe they can always return to later. It becomes a safety net in theory, but not a priority in practice. A distant option, not an urgent necessity. Something reserved for a future version of themselves that they assume they will eventually become. But Islam does not present repentance as a guaranteed endless opportunity that remains equally accessible at all times. It is open, yes. It is wide, yes. It is generous beyond human expectation, yes. But it is also tied to conditions that are not in the control of human assumption. The problem begins when a person starts building their life on delayed return. They tell themselves that change is always possible tomorrow, that turning back is always available later, that the door of repentance will remain just as open, regardless of how long they walk away from it. And slowly, without even noticing, that belief creates a dangerous emotional pattern. It reduces urgency, it weakens seriousness, it transforms spiritual accountability into something flexible and postponable. A person sins, and instead of immediate reflection, they think there is still time. They neglect obligations, and instead of concern, they assume correction can come later. They drift away internally, and instead of alarm, they rely on future intention. But what is rarely understood is that spiritual distance is not neutral. It is not static. It is not simply pausing one's state. It is movement. Every delay in return is itself a direction, and every repeated delay reinforces that direction until it begins to feel normal. This is where the heart becomes conditioned, not hardened in a single moment, but reshaped gradually through repetition of postponement. And the most deceptive part of this process is that life continues to feel normal while it happens. There is no immediate signal that something critical is being lost. There is no external alarm that forces awareness. Days pass, responsibilities continue, comfort may still exist, and within that continuity, the urgency of return slowly weakens. In Islamic understanding, this is where the real risk lies, not in the presence of sin alone, but in the assumption that time is emotionally unlimited. Because time is not experienced as a neutral resource, it is experienced as permission. And when a person feels they still have time, they often act as if accountability is distant, even if they believe in it intellectually. But Islam places a quiet pressure on this assumption by reminding that the door of repentance is not something that remains open by default without end. It is open by mercy, not entitlement, and anything given by mercy can also be withdrawn when the moment of truth arrives. No one is informed in advance when that moment will come for them. And that uncertainty is not meant to create panic. It is meant to destroy complacency, because if a person knew exactly when their opportunity would end, repentance would lose its meaning as a voluntary return. It would become a forced reaction at the edge of closure, and Islam is not about forced awakening at the last second. It is about conscious return while choice still exists. This is why the idea of expiry is not about fear alone. It is about sincerity. Repentance is only meaningful when it is chosen while escape is still possible, not when it becomes the only remaining option. And here is the difficult reality. Many people only consider return seriously when they feel they are running out of time. But the tragedy is that no one is told when they are actually running out of it. So a person may feel safe while being close, and may feel distant while still having opportunity. Feelings are not indicators of truth in this matter. Awareness is. Islam constantly redirects attention back to the present moment, because the present is the only space where change is guaranteed to still be possible, The past cannot be repaired, the future is not owned, only now carries certainty. And within that now, repentance is alive, not theoretical, not symbolic, real, active and accessible. But the longer it is postponed, the more it shifts from being a living choice to becoming a remembered intention, something a person still believes in but no longer acts upon. And that is where danger quietly settles in, not in rejection of repentance, but in the delay of it, because delayed return slowly becomes unfamiliar return, and what becomes unfamiliar eventually becomes unlikely. So the question is not whether repentance exists. The question is whether a person still responds to its urgency while response is still within their control. Because in Islam, the door is open, but walking through it is never guaranteed to remain within one's lifetime of opportunity. 6. You are being watched, not judged, but guided. There is a reality in Islam that, when properly understood, changes the way a person experiences every moment of their life. It is the awareness that nothing is hidden, nothing is unnoticed, and nothing is overlooked, not in a way that is meant to suffocate the soul, but in a way that redefines what it means to exist with purpose. Most people hear the idea of being watched and immediately interpret it through fear or judgment. But in Islamic understanding, the deeper meaning is not surveillance in the human sense. It is awareness with purpose. It is observation that is tied to guidance, not confusion. It is knowledge that surrounds you not to expose you, but to shape you. And this is where perception begins to change. Because when a person believes they are unseen, their behavior often becomes divided. There is what they show to the world and what they allow in private. There is a public self and a hidden self. And over time, that division becomes normal. The internal self starts to drift away from accountability because it assumes invisibility. But Islam removes that illusion completely. Nothing is invisible in the absolute sense. Not actions, not intentions, not even the subtle thoughts that pass through the heart and are dismissed before they become words. Everything exists within awareness that is not limited like human awareness. And yet, the purpose of this reality is not to trap a person in constant anxiety. It is to bring coherence to life. Because when a person truly internalizes that they are always within divine awareness, something inside them begins to reorganize itself. Actions stop being performed only for appearance. Intentions begin to matter more than outcomes. Private moments gain the same importance as public ones. The idea of no one is watching loses its power, because it is no longer fully true in the mind of the believer. But the deeper lesson is not simply that everything is seen. It is what that seeing represents. In human experience, being watched often implies evaluation, pressure, or criticism. But in Islamic understanding, being aware of by Allah is tied to something far more complex. It is tied to mercy, timing, protection, delay, correction, and consequence. It is not a passive observation. It is an active system of guidance that interacts with a person's choices in ways they do not always immediately understand. There are moments in life when a person is stopped from a decision they thought they were fully ready to make. There are situations where doors close unexpectedly. There are paths that seem open but become blocked without explanation. And there are other moments where a person is guided towards something they did not initially plan for, but later recognize as necessary. From a purely surface-level perspective, these events can appear random. But in Islamic reflection, they are part of a larger pattern of guidance that does not always announce itself in real time. This is why being watched is not just about awareness of actions. It is about the fact that your life is not disconnected from meaning at any point. Even silence is meaningful. Even delay carries function. Even difficulty is not detached from direction. And when a person begins to see life through this lens, their understanding of isolation changes completely. Because isolation, in the human sense, is based on the absence of other people. But in Islamic reality, absence of people does not mean absence of awareness. This realization can feel heavy at first, because it removes the illusion that there are moments where a person is entirely outside consequence or outside observation, but over time, that heaviness transforms into something else. It becomes grounding because it replaces randomness with meaning. A life that is always being observed in this sense is not a life without freedom. It is a life where nothing is wasted. Every moment has weight. Every choice has direction. Every experience has context beyond itself. And that is where guidance becomes real. Because guidance in Islam is not always loud or immediate. It is often subtle, a feeling of discomfort that prevents a harmful step, a moment of clarity that interrupts a wrong direction, a sense of reflection that appears without invitation, a reminder that reaches a person at a specific time that feels too precise to be coincidence. These are not random emotional fluctuations. They are part of a system that is constantly aligning a person back toward what is beneficial for them, even when they do not immediately recognize it. But here is where the responsibility becomes personal. Because guidance can be received, but it can also be ignored. A person can feel clarity and still proceed in distraction. They can experience reminders and still choose neglect. They can be given moments of awareness and still return to forgetfulness. And over time, what determines a person's direction is not the presence of guidance, but the response to it. This is why the feeling of being watched is not meant to create paralysis. It is meant to create alignment, to remind the heart that life is not directionless, that every internal and external moment is part of something meaningful. And when a person fully accepts that they are never outside awareness, something changes in how they live even the smallest parts of their day. Speech becomes more intentional. Decisions become more reflective. Private behavior begins to match public identity, and slowly, without dramatic transformation, the entire structure of a person's life begins to move toward consistency. Because the real effect of this awareness is not fear of being seen. It is the realization that nothing about you has ever been outside of meaning, even when you thought it was. 7. The final warning is actually mercy. There is a moment in every warning where the tone changes. It stops being just information and becomes urgency. It stops being just explanation and becomes a final attempt to reach a heart before distance becomes irreversible. In Islam, what is often referred to as final warning is not meant to be understood as pure fear or inevitable destruction. That is a shallow reading of something far deeper, because at its core, even the strongest warnings in divine speech are not expressions of abandonment, they are expressions of mercy reaching its most urgent form. To understand this, a person has to step away from the idea that warnings exist only to announce punishment. In human experience, a warning is usually associated with threat, stop, or else something bad will happen. But in divine context, warning functions differently. It is not simply about consequence. It is about awakening a heart before consequence becomes the only remaining teacher. Because when awareness is still possible, correction is still meaningful. But when awareness is gone, only outcome remains. And outcome without awareness is no longer guidance, it is finality. This is why the final warning is not sudden cruelty. It is extended mercy reaching its limit of softness. It is clarity increasing when subtlety was ignored. It is repetition of truth after repeated neglect. It is not escalation of punishment first. It is escalation of reminder. And that distinction matters deeply, because many people assume that if things become more intense, if reminders become heavier, if circumstances become more serious, if life begins to feel more constrained, that it is a sign of distance from mercy. But in Islamic understanding, increased clarity is often a sign that mercy is still actively reaching a person. The problem is not that warning becomes stronger. The problem is when response becomes weaker. There is a point where a person is no longer being introduced to truth for the first time. They are being reintroduced to what they already know but have delayed responding to. And that repetition is not redundancy, it is insistence. Because truth, when ignored, does not disappear. It returns in different forms. It appears in different moments. It reaches the heart through different openings, not because it is uncertain, but because the recipient has not yet aligned with it. And this is where the emotional weight of life experiences begins to change meaning. What a person calls pressure may actually be direction. What they call loss may actually be redirection. What they call disruption may actually be interruption of a path that was leading them away from awareness. Not everything difficult is punishment, and not everything comfortable is safety. But the human mind tends to interpret based on immediate feeling rather than deeper purpose. So when the final warning theme appears in Islamic reflection, it is not announcing that mercy has ended. It is revealing that time for delay is becoming narrow, that awareness is being emphasized more urgently because neglect has continued long enough, that silence is no longer sufficient. And yet, even at this stage, the purpose is not to close doors, it is to ensure they are still seen. Because one of the greatest mercies in Islamic understanding is that as long as a person is conscious of their state, change remains possible. The real loss is not recognition of wrongdoing. The real loss is indifference toward it. A heart that still feels concern is not a dead heart. A heart that still reacts to reminder is not beyond return. A heart that still questions its direction is not finished. The danger begins when reaction itself disappears. This is why even strong reminders are, in essence, acts of compassion. They are not meant to overwhelm, but to interrupt neglect. They are not meant to destroy hope, but to destroy delay disguised as comfort. Because delay is often the most deceptive barrier between a person and transformation. It does not reject truth openly. It simply postpones it. It allows agreement without action, awareness without change, understanding without response. And over time, that gap becomes identity. So when the language of final warning appears, it is not declaring that everything is already over in a mechanical sense. It is expressing that awareness is reaching its most urgent form before the opportunity to respond feels distant. And the real question it places before a person is not whether they understand the warning, it is whether they still have enough sensitivity left to respond to it while response is still meaningful. So now the question is no longer about what you heard or what you understood. The question is what you will do with it, because reminders were never meant to just pass through your ears and disappear into another video, another moment, another distraction. They were meant to interrupt something inside you, to break the cycle of delay, to shake the comfort of later, and to bring you back to a truth that never stopped being true, even when you ignored it. Nothing in this world was ever promised to stay. Not your time, not your strength, not your certainty. And every moment you are still here is not proof that everything is fine. It is proof that you still have a chance. But chance is not something that remains the same forever. It narrows, it changes, it reaches its point, and no one is told when that point will arrive. So don't treat awareness like entertainment. Don't treat reflection like something optional. And don't treat truth like something you can always return to later. Because later is not guaranteed to arrive the way you imagine it. If there is even a small part of your heart that felt this message, don't silence it with delay. Let it lead you back while return is still possible. Because the real loss is not hearing the warning. The real loss is hearing it and still walking away unchanged. And only you know what you are choosing right now.